Ever driven Sydney to Melbourne? It's the iconic Australian road trip. 850 k's of Hume Highway, draconian speed limits and a submarine somewhere in the middle. Well, today I'm starting the Sydney to Melbourne road trip, but only here in the USA. And I've got the perfect partner in crime. Meet the Dodge Challenger Hellcat. Let's go vandalise some roads.
Here is a trip as much about the journey as it is the destination. A 2,500 kilometre adventure that starts from the city of Melbourne down in Florida, venturing up the east coast of the US into the New York state town of Sidney. That's S-I-D-N-E-Y.
Now, I've driven the Sydney to Melbourne leg in Australia quite a few times, and one of the things I've really picked up is that the car that you drive can make all the difference to the trip. So what is Hellcat? Well, I'm glad you asked. This thing is basically the biggest, baddest muscle car that you can buy in the US. It's powered by a 6.2 litre supercharged V8 engine that makes 707 horsepower. That's 527 kilowatts in our money. It also weighs 2 tonnes, but that's not the full story with this thing. You really got to get down and get into some of the details just to realise why it is so special.
From Melbourne, we venture into northern Florida, stopping at the iconic Kennedy Space Centre and then onto the stunning Daytona Beach. We head north along the Interstate 95, eventually crossing the border into Georgia, the second of 10 states on our journey.
Now, the very first part of this drive was quite interesting. Through Florida, it's basically very reminiscent of the Hume Highway in Australia. Pretty flat, not a whole lot to look at, and the speed limit almost feels a little bit underdone. But the further northwest that we move, the more interesting that the scenery is getting. And I've got a feeling that the stretch that we've got coming up is really going to help set this trip apart.
Yep, right on the borderline between North Carolina and Tennessee is arguably America's greatest driving road. It's called the Tail of the Dragon, 318 bends in just 18 kilometres.
It's got a bit of everything. There's tightening radius turns, there's huge elevation drops, long straightaways and enough little challenges in between to keep you on your toes.
The Hellcat's Bilstein dampers, huge Brembo brakes and very tractable limited slip differential serve it well on this mesmerising ribbon of road. Soon though, it's back to the highway to continue the next leg of our journey. More highway means more fuel, but when you're paying as low as $2 a gallon, that's about 50 Australian cents a litre, you don't really seem to care all that much. The constant stops are also an opportunity to explore America's amazing array of sweets. Speaking of sweets, we decide to make one last detour on our way to Sydney, the small town of Hershey, Pennsylvania. Even the light posts are shaped like chocolate. We push on into New York State, where snow on the ground signifies us getting closer to our final destination. The town of Sidney, it turns out, is quite a bit smaller than its Australian namesake. The population sits at just over 5,000 people. The bridge is modest in comparison, and the weather at this time of year is brisk, to put it mildly.
Well, I've got to be honest, that was one of the most enjoyable drives I've ever done, and so much of it is owed to this car. I think if we lobbied for higher speed limits in Australia and we had the Hellcat available, then Sydney to Melbourne our way would be just as enjoyable. But until then, I've got to say, I think the Yanks have got us hands down.